Hi, Tom Andreas, here today to talk to you about a table saw. A table saw is probably the most powerful tool that you can have in your shop for getting a lot of different operations done. This tool that I use in the shop is from SawStop, and I've got it set up in a way that I think is the most safe way for it to be used. I've got a massive outfeed table so that I don't have the stock when it comes through the blade tipping down. I can rip boards that are 16 feet long and not have them fall off at the end, and so that makes a really safe situation. Also, the SawStop itself is the saw that you might have heard about, where when it comes in contact with the human body, it automatically senses an electrical connection and in a microsecond stops that blade. And if you want to look that up on YouTube, it's pretty fantastic. The owner actually does put his finger in the blade and it stops. If you look at the switch on the front of the saw, you'll see that you can tap that with your foot to shut it off if you get into trouble. You can bump it with your knee or your thigh if you can't get to it with your hand. I love the way that that switch is mounted underneath of there. It also has a really nice 52-inch sliding fence, and it's extremely accurate. Okay, so I just can't say enough about the quality of this tool. It's an American-made tool. It has the most powerful engine that I've ever used on a table saw or electric motor. And if you look at the safety device, if you'll kind of watch this down here as I touch with my finger, you can tell that it's sensing whenever I put my hand on there exactly whether I'm in contact or not with the blade. Some other features that are really well thought out and designed are this table insert that pops and locks at the same time, and so that can't be kicked up by the blade. I really like that. Another thing is this riving knife and the quick change safety devices that are available on the saw. And so that's how fast it is to go ahead and change the safety device. When you're using the table saw, you need to understand that the table saw probably accounts for more really disastrous accidents than any other shop tool. Now, all of them can do danger to you, but the table saw every year does some of the most damage. The tool that has the most accidents is a bandsaw, but the cuts on the fingers are not at all like the things that show up in the emergency room with a table saw. And most of the time when you have accidents, it's because the blade gets a hold of a piece of wood through a pinch or through getting turned on the table, and it throws it back at the operator, and then the operator comes in contact with the blade at the same time. And so what I want to do is show you just a little bit about what you have to watch for. Now, most people don't know that in this case, if you look at this piece of wood, it will pinch on the blade. And so here, as this has been sawn on the table saw, it's wide open, and up here it's pinched. And so what you get into is a situation where it's like a brake caliper on your car, like for a disc brake. This pinches down on this right here, and the same way that stops your car is the same way it'll stop the blade, and it'll start to smoke, and then you can't push it forward because it's pinching down on the blade. So in the next clip, I want to show you exactly how tightly that's pinched. So the danger in any type of pinch situation, I want to illustrate that to you. And so here the blade is, it's cut itself free of the wood, and here it is in a pinch situation. And it would just surprise you to know how tight this wood actually is on this blade. And so what happens is this rotates in this direction, then it tends to shove the board back at the operator, and that's where we get into so much trouble. Now, I've reinstalled the riving knife, and the riving knife, what its purpose is actually twofold. One is to keep this wood from squeezing down onto this blade, the same way that a set of disc pads pinch down on a disc in a car. And so that keeps, keeps this wood split again so that it doesn't press and throw it back at the operator. I'd like to share with you maybe just a way to think about the blade and which part of the blade is more dangerous. And you might say, well, that's a silly question. The whole blade exposed is dangerous, and that's true. But if you think about this blade and you were to cut this in half, would the back of the blade be more dangerous than the front of the blade? And if so, why would that be? Well, the back of the blade is more dangerous than the front, because the situation you can get into is that in the front, if you're pressing down, the forces are down on the table, and so the only place that the wood is usually going to go is down on the table. Whereas if the wood gets behind the blade, you're going to have a very dangerous situation because it can flip it up and throw it at you. And so that is why the back of the blade is so dangerous. So if you look at what the riving knife does, besides splitting the wood and keeping it apart in the case of a pinch, what it does then is it protects the back half of the blade. A lot of people, when they're thinking about a table saw, ask the question, how high should that blade be above the work? Well, there are a couple of different issues to keep in mind with this. And if you think about it like this right here, let me just scribe a line and show you what the issues are. Okay, so that's the line with the blade even with the top of the wood. And here is the line where the blade is all the way up. Now, when the blade is all the way in the up position, there's a lot more blade that's exposed that you can come in contact with. Now, that is dangerous. But the difference in these two things, whether the blade is low and right at the top of the wood, or whether it's totally exposed, is that the longer that the tooth is engaged in the wood, the more likely it is to burn and generate heat. And so if you're getting a lot of burning on your wood, a lot of times if you raise your blade, you can see that that's a much shorter arc that's drawn on that wood. And so there's a little bit of a trade-off. In my shop, I want to see one single carbide above the wood. And so that is kind of the trade-off between burning wood and safety. And that's kind of where we do it here. An advantage of using the larger guard is that when you push this in this way, this little foot can allow the wood to go in this direction, which it should, but if the blade gets pinched and it kicks back, it won't go back because it digs in. So this little anti-kickback device on both sides of a splitting or riving knife is probably about as safe as you can get with this tool. In our shop, we use a table saw for ripping, and almost only for ripping. All cross-cutting we tend to do either on a sliding compound miter saw or on a panel saw, which is a lot safer way to cross-cut. I know that out in home shops and a lot of different places, people are cross-cutting using miter gauges. We're going to go over that, but the safest operation to do with a table saw is a rip, which is to go with the grain of the wood. And when you do a rip, it's a lot safer if you have some really good push sticks. Now, these are push sticks that we make right here. You don't have to buy a fancy push stick. When you do a push stick, though, or you make your own design, like I really like this one because you can apply down pressure and you can control things without getting close to the blade. And remember, in our shop, the safety margin is 4 inches. 4 inches is kind of across your fist. And so you never want to be closer than that. Actually, for a table saw, that's closer than you need to be anyway. So distance is safety. And so if you create a device like this or make this, then what you're able to do is you're able to stay way above the blade, no matter really what happens. And so this is a wider one. When you were ripping narrower things, we have these that are 1/8 of an inch thick, 4 pieces where we're right up against the blade. So I want to kind of go over with you just some of the things that are very important in ripping, and I think the most important thing for you to think about is let's not be in line with the blade. The biggest thing that you can do to protect yourself is to not have your hand ever in line with the blade as you're pushing forward. And so if your hand isn't in line with the blade, you're not going to come in contact with the blade. So let's think about that first. That after that, and then if you're ripping and you have to use your hand, make sure that you use this like a railroad track so that you can put a couple of fingers over the back of this fence if you're getting your hands that close, which that's too close. And but if you are doing that and you're holding a piece along here, use that like a railroad track, because if the piece is jerked out in some fashion, then your hand won't be jerked into the blade. So always use that fence as a railroad track to keep yourself from coming in contact with that blade. The next most important thing then is to make sure that you have a consistent feed speed on your wood. And one thing that causes kickbacks is when a person is real jerky when they're feeding wood into the table saw. We want a nice, smooth, forward velocity, and then that velocity is going to keep us from having burn marks where we stop, and then tear marks where we're going too fast. So there's a speed that's between tearing and burning, and that's what we want to find when we cut. So what you saw me do there was to keep and maintain a very consistent speed as I progressed through the cut. And I used my board, which was parallel and against the fence. I don't make the board sideways on the wood. I don't want to do that. I want it to be up against the fence, and I want it to be good and tight in the corner of that fence. So when I'm finished with the cut, I want to push the wood all the way off the table, and then I want to keep my elbow straight and just use my shoulder and come back with the push stick. This is where the push stick lays on the saw when you're not using it. You can see from the last cut that the rate of feed was just exactly correct. And there are no burn marks, and it's nice and smooth, and it gives us that glue joint rip that these saw blades are so well known for. One thing I want to point out to you and show you graphically is just how when you get into a cut, a lot of people will want to back up in the cut if they start to sense some sort of vibration or any type of problem where it's pinching and it's beginning to act not normally. And so let me show you kind of what I see in the shop from people and what I want you not to do. Don't back up and do that. Now I can do that because I know what I'm doing, but this is what you don't want to do. You get into trouble, you take your knee or your foot, and you shut the saw off, and you don't move until you can get clear. When you do a full-length rib of something long, like this is an 8-foot piece, I want to kind of show you a way to think about pushing that through the saw. So the first thing I'm going to do is get back, and I want you to understand that you're not going to feed this thing through like this. You're going to walk the whole piece through with your legs and keep your upper body stable. So let me just demonstrate that for you. I hope you saw that the speed of the feed was very consistent, and that when you keep the feed consistent like that, there are no burn, that's not a burn mark, that's just the wood, but there are no burn marks, it's very clean. and you get a very consistent, smooth cut. So make sure, again, when you do that, just by way of review, that you get your upper body in position and you make that cut, and then you keep it consistent speed-wise, and you walk it through with your legs. And you probably notice also my hands actually never were on the table. So I kept a large distance with the push stick, smooth feed, and you'll just enjoy it when you get that type of a piece of wood to make that long cut. You will often come into a situation also where you won't need to use the push stick. It's quite common for you to handle a piece of wood with your own hands. The thing I want you to keep your mind on, though, is that you never want to be in the red zone, and you want to have this hand back out of the way. Another thing is you want to push from about the center between the fence and the blade. You want to have the pressure from the center of the piece of wood. So if you put your thumb here and pull it back, that's where you kind of want to place your thumb, and you want to drive with your thumb forward, and it's going to make it cut. I want to talk about cross-cutting now, and I've already said that table saws work best for ripping, and that is by far their most efficient use. However, I'm also aware that there are a lot of table saws in use at homes, and people have to cross-cut with them. So it's important, I think, to cover the information that is related to how things can go wrong and why you have to be so careful when you're cross-cutting. So the first mistake that a lot of people make is they will think that they can feed a piece that is long and narrow through. And this is where it gets dangerous, because if you look, as you strike this arc with this corner, if you were to draw that with a line, you'd see that it has to go in that direction. And so if you're in here using this and you're at this point right here, this is what happens. The blade will get onto this corner right here, and it will pull back. And so as it pulls back, it opens up right here against the fence, and it creates a wedge. So as this board turns into this blade, it's going to walk up this blade, and it's going to get caught here, and it's going to throw it at 250 miles an hour right at you. And so that is what you need to be so guarded about. If you're going to cross-cut on a table saw, you need to use a miter gauge. For those of you that have been around shop for a long time, you know what this is. It is a miter gauge, and it's a great tool, and it's extremely accurate. And so, but this miter gauge is a little bit different. I've modified it for safety. I very much like to have my miter gauge with a lot longer fence applied to it. And it's very easy to do. You simply build the fence that you want, and then take a set of screws and screw right directly into the back of the miter gauge. When we use the miter gauge, we go and put it in the miter gauge slot of the table saw. But the very first thing that we have to do is to clear the fence. So we want the fence way out of the way so that there can never be a situation where the piece that's cut off can get wedged against the fence. One thing that we absolutely never do is this right here. We never would use the fence and the miter gauge at the same time. If we use the fence and the miter gauge at the same time, this can twist in here and you will lose control of it, and then it will hit you at 250 miles an hour, and it hurts. So let's get that fence way out of the way, position the workpiece, clamp it, and always stand to one side when you're doing that. The reason that I'm so aware of that is because I have been hit before, sometimes on a windy day or whatever. If you're working outside with a table saw, that can get to chattering, and it will get picked up with the blade, and it just has a way of coming at you. And so always when you're using a table saw, be standing on one side of the blade. You know, these things work great left or right-handed, but it's very important in either case to be away from the line of the blade. Now, the last thing that I want to say to you is you can never freehand cut on a table saw. Freehand cutting means that you're doing it without a fence or without a miter gauge. And the reason you can't do that is because you can turn the piece, it will wedge against the blade. That has a 5-horse electric motor on it. There's no way that you can control that kind of energy. If it gets a hold of that piece of wood, it's going to break your fingers, throw it in your face. It's just a horrendous thing. Don't do that. So that is one thing that we stay completely away from, is freehand cutting. I want to show you a saw that I built that I think will solve a lot of problems for you. If you've got limited space in your shop, this is something that you can put together that's very space saving, and it incorporates so many different tools. First on this saw is a set of drawers all the way around it with all different kinds of push sticks and attachments and blades. This particular saw, of course, is the Grizzly, and you can see that, but it's got the big table, a full 52-inch that you can cut on a 4x8 sheet, which really saves you a lot of time when you're having to cross-cut full sheets all the way across this thing if you don't have a panel saw. And so you can see everything. It's all very viewable. It has this really good start and stop switch. And then as you come around here, this table, and in this particular shop, what you can't see behind the camera is a loading dock, and sometimes we need just a little bit more room. And so this table can drop down if you want to have a little bit less space, or you can pull it up to have a little bit of workspace. Then from this side, I've incorporated a drawer that has nothing but staples and fasteners and different nails for nail guns, because we use so many of them. And then over here, all the different tools. There are numerous plug-ins for power underneath of this all the way around. And the reason this is built like this is because it's pretty common that when you're doing picture frames or whatever you're doing, that you need to be able to clamp things down. And so your clamps, your C-clamps, will go right around this and grab onto any project that you've got. So coming back around this way, there are two sets of vices that you can use. And a lot of times when you're belt sanding and you've got a panel that you're working on, you can drop a board in here that's just a little bit higher, and then you can set the whole panel there, and then you can run a belt sander or whatever it is that you want to do right here on this end. So then again, all of the storage that's right here, all you have to do is just reach down, grab whatever tool you're working with, plug it back in. All the nail guns sit in their own slot, and everything is ready to go. It's very fast. I encourage you to think about organizing your saw in this way. Another thing is the massive outfeed table. A massive outfeed table creates an immense amount of safety as you move full panels and full sheets through there. And a lot of times as you're working on projects, you just need a lot of storage space to lay stuff out. On this side of the table saw, I've incorporated a fold-up router table. And this is really handy because you've got everything exactly at the right height. You can plug right into your suction, and then on the other side is a drawer. I know you can't see that from where you're at, but it's a drawer and it has all of the different routers in it. So I hope you can kind of see how this is built and how it is so useful for so many different applications. The suction comes right up and out and into the ceiling, and so you're always free to have a massive workspace. And even though it's a massive workspace, it fits into a small space. You know, no matter what you do, you're still going to make mistakes in the shop. I've been fortunate so far. I still have all of my fingers. And the longer that you work in the shop, the more that you know that things can happen that are unexpected. And so I want to plan for that eventuality. And so what I have done to take the best care of people that are in my shop is to assume that there are going to be accidents and assume that people are going to make mistakes. And so when those mistakes do happen, I want to be prepared for those mistakes. I want to to make sure that we can give a person who's had an injury the absolute best care. And so I put together a body parts recovery cooler, and inside of that cooler we've got the things that you would need to take care of it, and that would be plenty of towels to soak up and stop bleeding. If a finger is removed, there are a couple of baggies in here. This is what the vascular surgeons want. And then there are some gloves to deal with the blood. And so if someone were to remove a finger in the shop, we would run and fill this with ice, and we would cover that the area that's damaged, and then we would get the appendages or fingers into a cooler, because we know that the cells in your body will last quite a while if they're cool. So it's an idea for you. For me, it certainly is no joke. It's as serious as a heart attack. I hope you liked the video. If you did, click the like button and subscribe to the channel.